Welcome, class, to the Intro to Java Programming. In this lesson, we'll review methods and return types. So what is a method? Simply put, a method is a block of code that can be executed by calling the method name. In the first lesson, we created a simple unit test that performs a net pay calculation. In the next lesson, we created a class to hold the payroll responsibilities. In this lesson, we'll create a method to calculate the net pay. The code you're about to see is intended for novice developers to explain general concepts with methods and return types. Here's our basics project in IntelliJ where we last left off. Let's collapse these unit tests for more space. Let's create a unit test to prove the calculation for net pay works. Notice how the value for actual net pay comes from a class followed by a dot and followed by a method name. GetNetPay is the method that will execute the code. Let's create this method next. So paycheck amount is a better name. This name could work, but it's a common junior level programmer mistake. This leads us to a Coach Joe rule. Use meaningful method names. A method name like paycheck amount is unclear what will really happen. Adding a verb like get will give you a clue that a value will be returned. The words paycheck indicate what future process will need this amount. It's better to state the value returned, not the application or use of the value. Feel free to use this method name, but you'll find that many senior developers use the verb get to prefix an amount and words that indicate the value returned. Looking at our test, we have a compiler error. This method does not exist. Inside the payroll class, let's add a new method called getNetPay. A method can typically have an access modifier, a return type, a method name followed by parentheses. Inside those parentheses could be optional parameters. For this method, we have 3 parameters. After the parentheses, there are 2 curly braces used to represent a code block. This is where the code for the method will be placed. We have a compiler error. Let's hover over the red line. It states that we're missing a return statement. We declared a return type in the method signature, so we must return something. Let's talk about a return type. A method is a block of code that will perform some task. Some methods are expected to return an answer, and other methods are not required to return an answer. Here are 2 simple examples to consider. First, you ask a waiter for a glass of water, and you get a glass of water. This is an example of a method, say, getGlassOfWater, where an action occurs and something is returned. In this case, a glass of water. In the second example, you'll ask a waiter to take a dirty plate, and the plate is gone. This is an example of, say, remove dirty plate, where an action occurs, but you do not expect anything in return. This is a void method. In the method declaration, we stated the return type of the method is int. We need to return a value of type int. The keyword return is how you end the method and return the answer back. Is the return keyword needed on void methods? Return in a void method is not required, but it is allowed. There may be situations during a decision step when one condition executes code and another decision returns from the method. It is not recommended to use a return statement in a void method. Let's add in the rest of the code and see if our test passes. Let's go to the test. No compiler errors. Run the test. And the test passes. Let's step through the code and watch a few things happen. I'm going to set a breakpoint in the unit test before the method is called. Let's start the test in debug mode. We'll step into the getNetPay method by clicking the Step Into icon. This is how we drill into the code of a method as we debug. Notice the values of each parameter variable are values passed by the test. We can hover over each one of their variable names to see the value. You can also see that in the debug panel, those variables are listed. In the code block, we first declare a variable to hold the answer. The next line does the gross pay calculation. The next line does the net pay calculation by reducing the gross pay by the tax amount. The last line is the return statement, and net pay is the answer. Stepping into the next line of code takes us back to the unit test that made the call. Stepping into the next line now sets the actual net pay variable with the value returned from the getNetPay method. Let's stop this test and then run it without debug mode just to see the test pass. And the test passes. Correct. All the unit tests we have written are void methods. The testing framework calls each method by name and does not expect an answer in return. You don't understand the void data type? Void is not confusing. It is a keyword used with methods to declare that no return value is expected. Time for a Coach Joe challenge question. In a class, the constructor can be overloaded as long as the parameter signature is different. Can a method be overloaded with the same parameter signature? We have one yes and one no answer. Let's build a unit test and see what happens. Let's collapse the project tab, give ourselves a little more space. We want to make a copy of this existing getNetPay test. Let's make a copy. 3 things we want to change. Let's change the name of the test to make it unique. Change this to be string answer. Make that lowercase. Let's change the return data type for actual net pay from int to string. And then let's change the expected result to be a string. Put some quotes around this. All right, now let's go and fix the compiler errors inside the payroll class. Let's go to the payroll class. Let's take a look at our getNetPay method. Let's make a copy of it. Then let's change the return type to string. Let's also return a string value of netpay. And let's collapse this test. Notice that we get a compiler error. With the return types different and the parameter signatures the same, we get a syntax error. So the answer is the parameter signatures must be different. Just to prove we can overload methods, let's make the parameter signature unique. In the test, let's remove the parameter for tax. Let's change the data type of the variable back to an int. And let's change the expected amount from 350 to 400. In the payroll class, let's change the method return type back to an int. Let's remove the parameter for taxes. This will make the signature unique. Let's comment out the tax calculation. And let's return the net pay amount. If we run the test, it should pass. And it does. In case you missed any code, here are the unit tests. Let me collapse this down. And here is the payroll code. Correct. Building unit tests are a good way to prove your code works or experiment with ideas. You should now have a basic understanding of creating methods with or without a return value. You also learned that methods can be overloaded like class constructors. Your optional homework assignment is to create a unit test and method to calculate just the gross pay. In the next lesson, we will add more functionality to the payroll class with the use of properties and access modifiers. Remember, future senior developers, make it work, prove it works, then make it better. Ready? Break!